And yeah, great to be here. My first time in one of these events, so yeah, it's great to meet the kind of community. So I'm Matt, and I'm a product designer, and I design physical products. And I'm sure many of you will have heard hardware is hard as a phrase. And it's certainly something that I've been aware of throughout my career and always sort of just taken as a given. But over the last couple of years, I've really started to think a bit more deeply about why that's the case and what actually we can do about it to make it less difficult and what lessons we can borrow from other products that get developed. So just as by way of an intro, how many people here have developed or are developing a product of any kind? Cool. And how many have developed a piece of a physical product? Cool. And would you agree that hardware is hard? Yeah, okay. So a little bit of background. So my career has been spent developing physical products. Has anyone used any of these out of interest? I think it's probably incredibly unlikely. It's quite an eclectic mix. There is a Quidditch goal, which was first used by Everton Football Club, bizarrely. A cricket catching ramp, which I used with a semi-professional cricketer, which was absolutely terrifying. Equally terrifying, this is an automatic pressure cooker, which for anyone who's used a pressure cooker is essentially a bomb. So prototyping that when you're the only one who's done the calculations is quite scary. This is a smart air brick that opens and closes depending on weather conditions to help draft through or help deal with kind of circulation at homes. This is a smart soil sensing device that analyzes soil, actually sniffs it to give you kind of interpretations on the soil inside. And then this is an eyelash tinting shield. I actually had to attend a 3-hour webinar on eyelash tinting as part of this project, which was fascinating. I wasn't introduced as a designer, I was just introduced as another person doing training. So I don't think I've ever felt more out of place, but equally fascinating. But I kind of reflected back on all the products that I've worked on. Some have been commercially successful, others haven't. There's plenty more behind this sort of screen that have never kind of seen the light of day. And so much of my career has been spent on the engineering and technical development side, and lots of, in my opinion, really good engineering and design happened. But actually I've realized that there's kind of so many other things that need to be in place for a product to be commercially successful. And I think in hardware particularly, we often fall into the same traps that mean it's less likely for them to be successful. And I think there's an awful lot we can learn from the world of software. So fundamentally, product development is about demand and supply. That's kind of not a new concept. But as it relates to product development, on the demand side of things, it's does somebody want it? And on the supply side, can I deliver it? That hopefully makes sense, and I think that this applies to all products, not just physical products. But from my experience of developing physical products, what I think we typically do, we do an awful lot of supply and very little checking of the demand. So we spend a lot of time on technical development, on engineering development. Can we technically deliver this solution? And we sort of don't spend much time on the demand side of things. We don't necessarily think we can control that. And actually what I think happens is we do this. We do a huge amount of supply first and then test demand afterwards. There's a phrase, build it and they will come. And I like the quote, which is, that's not a strategy, it's a prayer. And so from my experience developing products, I've certainly been involved on this side of doing an awful lot of engineering. And people say, we need to develop the product, we'll build it all the way through to production, and then we'll go out and we'll sell it. And it just feels hugely risky. And I remember being at a talk where a really large consumer company in the UK, I can't name names, they were talking about their innovation process, their internal innovation process. And he said they asked 2 questions, can we do it and should we do it? And we answered them in that order. And that always seemed crazy to me that you'd do it that way around, because the supply side, can we deliver it, is hugely expensive. Technical challenges, lots of research and development, lots of engineering time that goes into it. And I think the demand question in some ways is easy to answer, and in a lot of ways is more important. And essentially, I think we should spend much more time answering this question and sort of deal with this one later. There will be engineering challenges, and supply isn't easy, but from my experience, you can often solve it with some sort of limitations or compromise. So most projects I've been involved with start with someone saying, I want to develop a thing. An app, a robot, a device. I have had someone ask to develop a perpetual motion machine. Interestingly, that wasn't actually what they opened with. It was kind of on page 3 of their brief. It was like an annotation. It was like, oh, this bit's perpetual motion machine. It's kind of like, well, if we solve that, the rest of this project's a bit null and void. So that's typically where I find that people start from. It's a complete focus on the thing. They've got an idea in their minds of the app, the robot. They've got a visualization of what this final embodiment of their solution looks like. And I think a better starting point is I want to enable a defined user to achieve an outcome. Now, lots of the previous slide where we think about the app and the robot and stuff, we have got that in our subconscious. But actually, if we frame it as this, we put our user front and centered, and we focus entirely on the outcome we're trying to deliver them. And we realize that the product, the app, the robot, whatever it is really just a vehicle to help deliver that outcome. And so by starting from this point, I think we set ourselves up much better to succeed. And we're also way more flexible in how we're actually going to go ahead and deliver that. So going back on demand and supply, I sort of wanted to phrase it as a three-step process that I think, again, applies to all products. So stage one, evidence of demand. Are people actually looking to solve this problem? Is it a problem that actually exists? That's often something I find that my hypothesis is this problem. We go out and speak to people and they haven't got that problem at all. They've got a completely different problem. Evidence of supply. So once we've found the demand, are we actually able to solve it? Does our technical solution actually offer the outcome and results that we promised? And then finally and critically, evidence of the supply meeting the demand in the real world. So evidence that there are people out there who have this problem and are willing to pay to solve it and are delighted that we have solved it and now act as a case study for us for kind of to move things forwards. And so that's kind of, I guess, the three golden steps that I would massively simplify the design process down into. To then put it in a roadmap, I've put this now from 3 steps to 5 steps, and again, I think this applies generally rather than to hardware or specifically software. But stage one, for me, has to start with gathering insights. I think often this itself gets overlooked, and we kind of dive straight into building. But we need some sort of insight, some sort of exposure to what that problem is. Either that's direct personal exposure, or we work directly with people, or we take users on us on that journey. But we've got some insight and evidence that that problem really exists. The next step is to create a saleable offering. Now, I haven't said here create a product. I haven't said an MVP. It's a saleable offering. And that is we need something to sell to someone. And that is quite crucial there, and we'll come on to this later. That doesn't need to be the product itself. But we need some way that we can test that this problem actually exists, and we can test that people want to solve it. And once we've done that, we need to sell it. And there's a lot of talk out there at the moment, which I quite strongly agree with, which is the only way you can really test demand is to sell something. So the process of actually creating this offering and then selling it is hugely informative to test exactly where that demand is, test exactly what form of the solution people are interested in, and really generate that proof. And once we've got that in place, we can iterate. So by going through a sales process, we can do iteration, we can go back to here, tweak this outcome, and find out exactly where that product market fit is. So what is the formulation of the solution that exactly meets the demands of our users? What is the formulation of it that works for them and works for us, and we can consistently deliver? And so these three blocks in the middle, I think, are critical. And finally, we come onto the scalable commercial offering. So once we've found that product market fit, we've delighted a set of customers, we've solved their problem, then we want to kind of scale it and work out how can we deliver this en masse. So we've satisfied 1, 5, 10 people. Then probably according to our business plan says we need to satisfy 100,000 people. Then it's a case of how do we actually scale that and make that process happen. So I think that is my summation of the general roadmap for product development. What I think happens in hardware is we do this and we miss the middle 3 blocks. Actually, we often miss this block also, and we just go here. And again, we have in our minds, I've got a vision of a product I'm going to sell 10,000 of, and we just start developing that. We make prototypes along the way, but they're still with a vision of this is just an iteration of the final solution. Is not a great phrase, but that final kind of product offering that we've got in our mind. And again, I think that's because we're blinkered on, we've just got this vision. And with physical products, that's so obvious to happen because it's such a tangible thing that it's really easy to kind of imagine that, and it's very difficult to kind of think more broadly than that. So I think we miss out these 3 gaps, and that is a problem for many reasons, but primarily it's expensive, it's slow, and it's risky. So going all the way to this stage, developing physical products, the ones that I typically work with, agri-tech and med-tech products, but all sorts of kind of technical products. A product that involves electronics and software, at a minimum, you're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds. When you go into the medical realm, easily into millions. So aiming for that kind of moonshot, full, scalable solution is inherently incredibly expensive. And that is, often that means we need to raise investment, we need grant funding initially, we need to get stakeholders on board. And they, as well as us, are well aware that that is risky. Kind of missing out these steps and going straight to this point is really risky, and therefore they're kind of naturally going to be reluctant to do that. It's also really slow. So developing that full commercial offering, something that can be manufactured, takes often years. And that process to actually get to a point where we've got something that could be scaled and could be sold and could be sold to customers takes a lot of time. So all these things, expensive, slow and risky, are a big turn-off for investors, stakeholders, but also not particularly attractive for ourselves kind of developing products. So what do I think we can learn from, the reasons why these I think are particular barriers. So create a saleable offering. I've specifically said that it's a saleable offering and not, as I said, an MVP. And I think this is kind of the crux of it with hardware. It's very difficult for us to understand what it is that we sell, if not the product. But I think that is fundamentally what we need to try and do. How can we sell the outcome and not necessarily focus on the thing, the device, the robot, whatever it is? So being aware of what that saleable offering could be, I think our options are slightly more limited when it comes to hardware. Selling an initial offering, so selling a piece of hardware, if we do go down the route of a physical device, selling it is a fundamentally complicated process. We need to have manufacturers, we need to have supply chains, we need to have logistics and distribution. And all of those stages, there are a whole number of things that often get missed or kind of left till the end. Things like packaging, things like labels, instructions for use. Simply kind of setting up a distribution network is a complicated process, and all of these things are expensive. So if we do decide that our first saleable offering is our version of the product, all of this comes with it. Again, it's time, complexity, risk. And so it's quite difficult to do that. And then iterating based on demand. If we're getting iterating based on kind of feedback from our customers, it's a really slow process. We can't simply A/B test with physical products. We can't just say, oh, we'll add that feature in later. We can, but what it often means is we've got to go back, not quite to square one, but pretty much to the beginning. We've got to go back and change our designs. We've got to change our manufacturing tools. We've got to change our supply chain. We've probably got to recertify. That's another point I missed out on the selling offering. If we're selling a physical product, it probably needs to be certified, UKCA marked, medical device regulations, all those sort of things. Yep.
I really like the point. So how do you know what to iterate? Like off your analysis, what would you know that is the right thing to iterate based on demand?
Yeah, that's kind of the crux of it. Is with hardware, it's really difficult to do that. So ideally, you want to get feedback from paying customers, and then you can go ahead and tweak it. And fundamentally, with hardware, that probably means you've got to go back to the beginning. And what it really means is that we have a tendency to over-engineer our products. We say right at the beginning, it's going to be super expensive for us to recertify this and redesign it. So I don't think it needs Bluetooth, but we'll put Bluetooth in there just in case, because we might need it later and we can turn it on. And so as someone who receives spec lists of products to design, it ends up being enormous. And it's like, we'll have this, this, this. We probably won't use this, but we might want it. And so it just gets really complicated. Not only does that get expensive, it also means that we're losing the clarity of the vision of the outcome we're trying to provide, and we sort of end up with a Swiss Army knife. I worked on a product that was a medical device that was going to be used in hospital theatres, and I was designing it, and we were pretty refined in terms of a prototype, and then at the last minute the client said, by the way, it might get used in helicopters as well. And I was like, are you sure? Like, that's quite a big, and I literally had to do a whiteboard that was like, hospital ward, helicopter. Like, this one's light, this one's dark, this one moves, this one's stationary, one person, stressful, helmet, loads of people, probably still stressful, but like fundamentally designing for all these things. And that's a real temptation. I understand why we do it, because we don't want to go back to the beginning and design something all the way from scratch for a new set of users. So we end up with a Swiss Army knife of all these kind of features that maybe don't talk to each other, maybe don't, and we lose that clarity on exactly the outcome that we're trying to deliver.
It makes it more complicated. If somebody's only going to use it simply, you've got all these extra possibilities.
Yeah.
And you might not even be able to sell it because it just seems too complicated for what's needed.
Yeah, and you end up, in that scenario, you end up probably satisfying neither of them, because you've got a product that's been compromised because it's trying to do too many things. So you've lost your clarity on really solving that problem for that one particular user. But it makes sense as to why we do it, because it's so difficult to go back and iterate. Scaling the commercial offering is difficult regardless, I think. I think that's kind of not unique to hardware. That's a common problem. And so in software, I would like to caveat this before I go into this in detail. I'm not a software expert. I work on physical products, and I work alongside software engineers, and the last couple of years I've spent a lot of time with kind of founders and people developing software solutions. So this is my interpretation of what can be done with the process. I'm sure there are people here much better placed than me to advise on what actually happens and the risks. But mock-up tools, vibe coding, and kind of Wizard of Oz back-end experiments as a 3 set of tools, I think are hugely beneficial in the software space to deal with these 3 areas. So as someone with no software experience at all, using Miro or Figma, I can mock up the front end of an app and show it kind of going through screens and showing the process. There's kind of no back end at all, but I can very quickly put that in front of someone and give them an idea and help them understand how this product is going to work. I can do that very quickly and relatively cheaply. I'm aware that's not a full product offering, but it's kind of a way that we can get something in front of people. Using vibe coding tools, we can get a functional version of that app software out there and doing and demonstrating its effectiveness. And potentially, I'm aware there are kind of big risks here in terms of scaling this and offering this as a proper solution, but we can get something that we can sell to people and get something in the hands of users much earlier on in the process. And I kind of said Wizard of Oz here, this is kind of like an experiment which says you've got kind of maybe the shiny front door, you've maybe got the app, the front end of the UI, but in the back room, it can be something as simple as someone just with a Google Sheet. And there are lots of examples where this has been done. I'll come on to that to say you can build the front end quickly and the back end, you can kind of hide from the user and you can go in and tweak and modify and update as you want in the very early stages. And I think all of these together means in software, it's much easier for us to cover these 3 blocks. And I'm sure there are examples in software where that doesn't happen, and we still go straight ahead and build this full final offering. But I think it's becoming more common and more obvious how you navigate these small stepping stones and don't end up making this massive leap which feels really risky. A couple of examples. To come back, so the crux for hardware really is that we need a faster and cheaper way that we can validate demand. So how can we actually prove that people want it without spending hundreds of thousands of pounds and going on that really risky path? So the only real way that we can gain validation, as I said, is to sell something to a real person. We can get letters of interest, we can do customer discovery interviews, we can speak to people, and I think all of that stuff has its place. But fundamentally, the only way we can really prove demand is to sell something to someone and check, are they willing to buy it, and does it solve their problem, and do they come back for more, or kind of talk about it and ask and tell other people to buy it as well. So we come back to the man with the box with a question mark on it, we need something to sell. And I think that's where it's complicated for hardware, because it's not immediately obvious what's in this box. So to take some examples going back to the software space, I spoke to a founder recently who was working on a booking app. So it was a place where people could book appointments and kind of automatically schedule them. And what they did was they built a front end where people could click on appointments. And what the founder was doing in the back end was when that notification came through, it didn't actually kind of really link to anything. They got a notification, they went in, they made a booking on the site, they came back to the first site and deleted that availability. So they literally just had the front door, and the back end they were kind of running around. It's not glamorous, it's not efficient, it's probably not super profitable because they're kind of spending a lot of time doing it, but they were able to test that and kind of prove that early on. Is anyone here familiar with the Firefly's recent story about how they founded this? So Firefly is an AI note-taking app. I'm sure you guys are kind of familiar with them. You kind of join a call, a bot joins a call, and at the end, sometimes everyone, often only the person who initiates it, gets the meeting notes and then claims they'll share them and often doesn't. With the Firefly's example, when they first launched this, they said, we're running out of demo, and they would join the meeting and the AI bot would join the meeting, and at the end of it, the user would get their summarized set of meeting notes. The founders recently admitted that what actually happened was that they were joining the call with their camera off as the bot, listening to the meeting, typing notes, summarizing it, and sending it to them. Huge ethical issues, privacy issues that I kind of have strong opinions on, but fundamentally, again, it proved that with a very manual work around this kind of Wizard of Oz type experiment, they were able to prove that the user appreciated the value, they were willing to pay for it, and it was helpful for them. And I guess they were able to test how long do these notes need to be, what format is helpful to people, what are the points of this service that really speak to what the demand that people are doing. And DoorDash, it's a food delivery service. The delivery services we have now have got incredibly complicated logistical chains, software systems in place to kind of manage all the kind of processes going on. But when that was first launched, the founders in that case simply took local orders from local residents and just drove to the local restaurant, picked it up, and delivered it to the customers. So again, it's not hugely profitable, and it's not in itself a proof that the business model works, but it's proof, in each of these cases, people were able to get in front of customers and test that the outcome was actually valuable to someone, and test that they were willing to pay for it. So what can we do in hardware? The first option is pre-sale. So I'm sure people are familiar with this, but Kickstarter, crowdfunding, those sort of things. We can mock something up and we can put it on crowdfunding platform and we can get demand and we can get people to buy it to prove people are interested and then go ahead and manufacture it. This sounds quite attractive and does work, but actually to get to a position where you know how much it's going to cost to manufacture and be able to satisfy all these pre-sales, you actually need to be relatively far along the process. You need to have done all your prototyping, you need to have a manufacturing partner in place, you need to have manufacturing quotes, and you probably need to have some elements of the supply chain set up. Otherwise, you just have no idea how you're actually going to satisfy those orders. The other thing that happens, a bit of a secret of crowdfunding, is the way that crowdfunding campaigns go viral is they hugely overshoot their targets. So if you'll go on the Kickstarter homepage and you'll see the top project there says overfunded by 5,000%. And so people have learnt this, and what they do is they set their goals incredibly low. So I actually went on this as an example. It's like a tiny Stanley knife that I actually thought was super cool and I was probably interested in. I think their goal was like £2,000. I was like, no, you're not going to do anything with £2,000. And they've raised £100,000. So it works, but like the worst case scenarios here is they set a target of £2,000 and raise £2,000, because then you're like, what are you going to deliver? So hugely risky, but I do think that's preferable. At least you get proof of sales, and if no one buys it, you don't have to go ahead and manufacture it, and it removes the risk of you paying up front for lots of tooling and lots of kind of manufacturing setup, and you kind of wait until you've got those customers. So that is an option, and what exactly you show there? Is it a prototype? Is it a photorealistic render? It might be something else to kind of show an early vision of the product. Potentially what's more interesting is that you can sell or sell as a service, and this is done quite often in software, but I think there are opportunities to do this in hardware. So I work with an agri-tech company, not the one on the first slide, another founder, who wanted to develop quite a complicated agri-tech device. It was kind of autonomous and had loads of features in it and was going to be hundreds of thousands of pounds. And what I advised that founder was, before going ahead and doing that, you can go ahead and manually collect this soil, go farm to farm, collect the soil, interpret it, use whatever tools you want in your lab. Maybe that's a prototype, maybe it's existing off-the-shelf tools. It doesn't really matter. Go back to the farmer and provide your report, your insights, whatever, and sell that as a consulting offer initially. And again, that allows you to get in front of that customer. What are they actually interested in? Because it's probably not soil. It's probably yield or crop health or how much fertilizer you're using. But you get a real sense of what it is that's valuable to them. And then your goal is to remove yourself from that process and replace yourself with a product. But the point is, you're not leading with the product. You're leading with yourself and focusing on that outcome. The other thing you can do is a paid pilot. So a lot of people talk about pilots quite skeptically, but I think if you do them in a paid manner, that is a suitable way to get in front of people. And I've worked with a medical company where they're running a pilot. So they've got a paid customer who is paying for them to provide a service to their lab. But importantly, they're not selling them their device. So they're not creating a product, certifying it, and selling the device so the lab owns the device. The founder owns the device throughout this. It's a time-limited trial, and it's in the labs, and people are able to use it and interact with it and test its kind of value, but fundamentally they don't own the device. And that's not to say that you don't do safety testing or you don't do any certification, but it means you can get something in front of people and get evidence and get feedback from people earlier on in the process, rather than going through a full certification process, getting all your supply chain set up, and all the other things that go along with selling someone a product they own. You don't need to have that all in place. And because you own the prototype, you can constantly tweak with it. You can bring out another version, add another feature. The client doesn't really care about it. They're just, as long as they get the outcome they're interested in, they're happy. And you can then keep developing it while proving that providing a positive outcome for your customer. And the next one, which is slightly left field and isn't so much of a selling option, but is broadly about creating a community. So lots of these options here are really about how do we get in front of users and learn from them. So I was working with someone who's developing a piece of DIY audio equipment. And before going ahead and actually build, they had an idea of what they wanted to build, but before going ahead, they actually had a community of several thousand audio enthusiasts. And they were interacting with them every day about what it was they liked, what kit was out there, where the big gaps were, what people were massively interested in. And they had already a community of perfect early adopters. You were right in front of customers early on. You could understand what it was they were interested in, and he was in a perfect position then to deliver exactly that. So really in each of these scenarios, we're getting in front of people as soon as we can and proving that outcome is of value or of interest to people. So we really want to create an offering that we can sell to a handful of early adopters to understand how we can meet demand. So rather than this point here where our business plan says we're going to sell 10,000 units in Q1 of 2026, What I think is much more important is how do you sell to 5 people? How do you generate a case study of 1, 2, 5 people who are absolutely thrilled? And then it's a case of how do we turn that 5 into 10 into 1,000? And that's where the scalability becomes a separate problem. But once you've kind of proven that some people are delighted, it's a case of replicating that demand. And as I said at the beginning, not trying to satisfy, if you have a user group of 10,000 people, some are in hospital wards and some are in helicopters, it's very difficult to solve all of those people's problems at the same time. Just to kind of reframe this, and without kind of repeating myself too much, really to simplify it, our users are currently in position A, they have a current negative outcome. A process is not just painful or a pain point, but something really tangible. It costs money, they've got a poor health outcome, it takes them loads of time, something like that they really care about. And we are promising to get them to a promised future with a positive outcome. We're promising to save them amount of time, save them amount of money, or deliver a better health outcome. One of those kind of 3 big picture results. And our product is just this car, and it doesn't matter what that is. I think that's a key point, is that can change and that's dynamic. It might be us, it might be a service, maybe it's an app, probably won't ever be the perpetual motion machine, but it's probably one of these options. And the point is that this can change. We can start here, and then we go to a service, and then maybe an app's involved, and then a device. And the process here is ultimately want to remove ourselves from the process. Those examples at the beginning from software, DoorDash and Fireflies, are really manual. Like, you don't want to be sat in everyone's meeting typing notes, but for the first 10 customers, it's totally fine just to prove it works, and then you remove yourself and replace yourself with the product. So if anyone is still sort of interested in this area, a guy that I've got a lot of this information from is a guy called Rob Snyder. He's American, and he does product market fit really for B2B SaaS. I'm super fascinated by his stuff, but a lot of time was sort of questioning, this is great for software, but it doesn't work for hardware. Like, how does this stuff apply? How can you sell before you've built? And over the last year or so, I've really been thinking about how it does apply to hardware, and the more I think about it, the more it does apply. So if you're in software space, this is great. If you're in the hardware space, you can kind of join me in sort of thinking about how it actually applies. And so just to conclude with a challenge, like I say, this was sort of my starting point, was it's great, but it doesn't work for me. If you're in that position, I'm really interested in exploring this area further. So as a challenge, if anyone is developing a product, feel free to share as much as you want. But I want to see if I can think of ways that we could validate it earlier. So if you've got a product idea and you're thinking, this is interesting, I kind of get it, but I'm not sure if it works for the situation I'm in, I'd like to have a bit of a challenge for me to think about if there are ways you could potentially validate that earlier or develop more efficiently that doesn't involve selling that kind of final vision. So that's me. Super interested. Everyone's got any questions? Interested to hear from people who've maybe applied some of these approaches in software. If you've applied them in hardware, that's great too. Or if you've kind of got any questions about how it might work for you. But yeah, that's me. Thanks. Yeah.